Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to come out politics. So, in amongst the excitement of a government with a huge majority somehow finding it difficult to get major legislation passed, Labour have just published their roadmap for something that's a lot more crowd pleasing, or would be if they'd tell anyone about it. It's the timetable for new workers' rights coming online, and not only acts to let us know when certain parts of the Employment Rights Bill will become active, but it's a handy list of the 22 major new rights that tens of millions of people will be getting quite soon, and I would think they'd like to know about. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So I've just been putting the finishing touches to the script for the video on Labour's first year in power for this weekend. It's incredible to reflect upon it. I'm not sure I can think of a time when a government did so many really good things, because there's an awful lot of things people just don't seem to be aware of. But because they did some stunningly stupid things, they're like getting zero credit for them, even amongst those people for whom they're popular. But as well as despairing at the really dumb stuff, it's worth looking ahead at the very positive moves. And one of the biggest is the Employment Rights Bill. 22 new and improved rights for workers, which are just around the corner. It's worth noting again, and despite the U-turns on what was serious but nonetheless a small number of policy disasters, their main agenda policies, the big ones that they've been pushing, have been chugging along very nicely at all. Shame they don't want to tell people about that, so I will. There will be more to say about the welfare bill vote last night, by the way, because there were extra shenanigans. But as I'm pretty confident that at the point at which this video has come out, Kemi Badenoch will definitely have brought it up at PMQs. I think I'll be discussing it later on today anyway. For now, and just to hopefully remind people that the entire Labour operation is mostly working pretty well, it's not the clown show on offer, Labour have published their roadmap for workers' rights, and it's the timeline of when all the different benefits in the Employment Rights Bill, which is coming very close to being passed into law now, will be implemented in law. Because of course, when new laws are passed, they don't necessarily become active immediately. In this case, businesses are going to need time they first of all need to become familiar with their new legal requirements. They're going to have to update their policies. They'll need to train managers as well as some other staff. So this roadmap tells us when different rights will become law. Some of the provisions are immediate, but the rest sort of come online over 2026 and 2027. So they're going to be in place and powered up at least a year before the election. And if the election is after 5 years, it'll be 2 years. Although a couple of things will become active immediately, like I say, there's two pieces of anti-union and anti-strike legislation passed by the Tories that's just going to be repealed. That's it, gone, in the bin, bye-bye. The Strikes Minimum Service Levels Act 2023, that was the recent one. And the Majority of Trade Union Act 2016, gone. The bill is in the reporting stage of the House of Commons, so very, very close to the end now. Basically, once that's completed, and that's not a particularly lengthy period, there's like final approval from the House of Lords, then it goes to the House of Commons for a last little check by MPs, voted for, done. And I would expect it to be in place. It might be in place in the next few weeks. It could actually be in law in the next few weeks. I would certainly expect that Labour want it in place for conference season, because Starmer's going to need something very big to present to the Labour conference. So let's go through the other 20 new improvements for working conditions and when they will be legal requirements. So I'll link this website below. This is where the government have placed them. It's really good. The reason I'm doing the video in this particular way is because it's just a handy little list for anyone who wants to not just know when these things come into effect, but if people go, oh, well, what have Labour done? What are Labour doing? What are Labour doing? This is just a handy little list. These are things that are coming for tens of millions of workers. So at the top, after the bill is passed, immediate repeal of those two acts. Then April 2026, there's another tranche of new ones. So what's coming then? Collective Redundancy Protection Award doubles the maximum period of the protective award. That means that you've got better financial security, as it says there, for workers facing mass redundancies. Day one paternity leave and unpaid parental leave, as it says there, to support families from the start of employment. Whistleblowing protections to encourage reporting of wrongdoing without fear of retaliation. Fair Work Agency established to make sure that in the workplace you've got certain values promoted. Statutory sick pay, that was a big one. So it says it removes the lower earnings, because if you were earning below a certain amount, you just didn't get it, right? And the waiting period. And trade union measures, including simplifying trade union recognition process and electronic and workplace balloting. There's been particular issues with some workplaces getting through loopholes so they didn't have to recognise unions. There's also been some dodgy practices, like Amazon, for example, tried on at least one occasion. Because you need at least something like half your workers to vote to become basically unionised, what Amazon have done in the past is just suddenly hire a load of temporary workers on the understanding that those temporary workers don't vote for being unionised, as a way of, if you increase the number of workers you've got, then the proportion who will vote for being unionised is then smaller and it can drop below the threshold. So lots of dodgy practices that'll be going then. Now, I am just going to flick forward for a little bit because there's something else coming in April 2026 that you may notice in your workplace, but it doesn't become law till 2027. So the gender pay gap and menopause action plans. Now, it does say introduced on a voluntary basis in April 2026. So why does sometimes you introduce something but it's not law for a year later? Well, there's something happening with me actually in terms of the way I do my tax returns. From next year, I have to use commercial software to do my tax returns. This, by the way, I'm not quibbling about it. It's an anti-tax avoidance scheme by HMRC, so I'm fine with it. But they wrote to me and said, like they'll have written to everyone who does tax returns, self-assessment tax returns, and they sort of said, well, this is coming in next year. From next year, you have to do this, but you might want to do it this year to get ready for it. Now, as it happens, they wrote to me far too late. I mean, it's because it's a new government, right? They're only just working these things out. Although I think this may have been something that was actually initiated by the Conservatives, to be fair to them. But nonetheless, I was written to too late, and I thought, look, I'm already on with my tax return. I'll just do it next year clean. But it's just to give you an opportunity so that you can make your mistakes without falling foul of the law, right? So what will this do? Although I'll discuss it in a moment as well. Gender pay gap and menopause action plans. Now, this is a classic case of something that a lot of employers do already. And it's, again, I want to emphasise that a lot of these rules, which some businesses are going to chunter about, oh, it's extra bureaucracy, extra red tape. Yeah, good employers already like this. You know, good employers already, I mean, my wife's employer, for example, is very good about these sorts of things. They're not necessarily amazing, but they do report. I mean, they're not going to have to change very much at all for this, I happen to know. Right? Bad employers, they'll hate it. But that is something, as I say, it's going to become law in 2027. So from 2027 or at a certain point in 2027, I think probably April, businesses will have to have gender pay gap and menopause action plans. In other words, some policy that says this is how we're going to tackle these things and how we're going to make sure that women are supported in the workplace with these issues. But it doesn't become law till 2027. In terms of later on for 2026, October 2026, ending unscrupulous fire and rehire practices. This is one of the big ones, making sure that you can't have employers go, oh, we want you to have worse working conditions. Are you going to pay me more? No, we might even pay you less. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, we're going to sack you. Oh, but there's no one else who can do the job. I don't care. I'm going to sack you. Then I'm going to advertise. You can apply for it again. I'm quite happy to take you on the new role with worse conditions and lower pay. That's been scrapped. Regulations to establish the Fair Pay Agreement, adult social care negotiating body in England. This is going to be incredibly important, of course. As it says there, raise standards pay in the social care sector. And particularly when we're deciding that we're going to make it more difficult to attract immigrants to fill those roles. We're going to need to make that profession or those similar professions a lot more attractive. Tightening tipping laws, strengthening the law on tipping by mandating consultation with workers. So basically, a business is going to have to work out its tip policy in coordination with its workers. Requiring employers to take all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment of their employees, to create safer, more respectful workplaces. So sexual harassment in the workplace will no longer just be something that the abuser is responsible for. The workplace is responsible to make sure that it takes, as it says, all reasonable steps. It has to have a plan for dealing with it, basically, and has to take it seriously, have to be able to demonstrate that they're doing whatever is reasonably necessary to prevent sexual harassment in their workplace. Introducing an obligation on employers not to permit the harassment of any kind of their employees by third parties, to extend protection to all work environments, including public-facing roles. So, in other words, you've got to protect them from aggressive lobby groups, things like that. And then another tranche of trade union measures, including, it says, new rights and protections for trade union representatives, extending protections against detriments for taking industrial action and strengthening trade unions' right of access. So in other words, help, again, reasonable action to accommodate the activities of trade unions. Some employers are really good about it. They even say, okay, well, these officers, you can use these facilities to conduct your work. Some employers want to make the work of trade unions incredibly difficult. Again, always be suspicious of any business that doesn't welcome a constructive dialogue with a trade union. And this, again, provides more access for trade unions in the workplace. So the first lot in April 2026 makes it easier for trade unions to operate in the first place. And the second one makes it easier for them to do their business. Then the last lot, 2027, so we'll discuss the gender pay gap and menopause action plans. Also enhanced dismissal protections for pregnant women and new mothers. Safeguard job security during pregnancy. It says maternity leave and return to work periods. Not easing people out just because they're deciding to be pregnant or they need maternity leave. And that's apparently inconvenient to employers. Sorry about that. But at the end of the day, if people look, we have a situation, particularly just in terms of general fairness, I would support this one. But also look at the political situation in this country. We're a little bit anti-immigration at the moment. There's a lot of people who are not necessarily anti-immigrant, but, feel that it got out of control, there was too much. Right, okay, but we need the workers. So what we're going to do? Well, we hire more British workers for these jobs. Okay, so then, therefore, we're going to need two things. First of all, as we keep being reminded, we're going to have more babies. Well, we've got a declining birth rate and have had for decades. So how are we going to reverse that? We're probably not going to in all reality. But how are you going to do that? You've got to make it easier for people to be able to have children without wrecking their careers. So if you suddenly make being pregnant or having a young child, an infant child, a problem for employment, then you're actually discouraging people from having babies. And we need those, if you're going to try and do without immigrants in future, or a large number of them, then we're going to have to reverse this declining birth rate, aren't we? But also, again, we have a need for workers, so why chase off a load of them because they have a family? Create a modern framework for industrial relations to build a fairer, more collaborative approach to workplace relationships. Again, all part of partnerships between employers and unions. Bereavement leave, give workers time to grieve with job security. Again, lots of employers wouldn't have to change a thing for these things. They'll update their policies like everyone else just to make sure they're in compliance with the law. But in terms of their practices, their business practices, I've had bereavement leave. I've known other people that have as well, and have had employers who've been really accommodating, really understanding. This is only going to be a problem for those who aren't. Ending the exploitative use, another big one, of the 0 hours contracts to provide workers with stable hours and predictable income. So the only 0 hours contracts that should exist are the ones that employees have asked for. So when some people say, oh, but but some of our employees find them useful. That's okay, they can ask for them. You just can't impose them. Day one, right to protection from unfair dismissal. Ensure all workers are treated fairly from the start of employment. There's too much taking people on where you've got a couple of years where they don't have as many rights as other employees. And if you've got the sort of job where you reckon you can train them up relatively quickly, hire them for a couple of years, then make it very uncomfortable for them later on, elbow them out, get someone new in. No. So day one rights. And finally, improved access to flexible working. Help people balance work with family, health and other responsibilities. And I'll just make this as my last point. I'm going to say, this will be for requesting just reasonable adjustments where you're still doing your job. I mean, this will be aimed partly at working from home. I find it absolutely incredible that after COVID, there are some businesses that do understand. Again, I big up my wife's employer. They mostly are very supportive of working from home. My wife works from home. She sometimes needs to go into the office, but mostly she works from home. And you know what? It's brilliant. She actually gets on with more stuff because there's not as many people popping in for a cup of tea with her and stuff like that. It's just, I mean, if some people have to travel half an hour or 40 minutes or more to go to work, just cutting that out, it cuts congestion for people, because obviously there's a lot of people who have to physically be at the workplace. So it cuts congestion for them. So it makes transport easier for others. It helps people get to work quicker. If you've got a load of people on the road going to an office to do a computer job that they could do at home, there's many benefits to the employer. They're not going to get stuck in traffic. Some dozy high-sided vehicle that thinks it can get under that bridge and, oh no, it can't get under the bridge. I've seen a few of them. I've been late to work a couple of times because of that. That doesn't happen. You instantly cancel that out. You're also saving electricity because they're going to use their own electricity at home. Employers don't generally provide an allowance for that. So many benefits to the employers. It means you can hire people from other parts of the country if you're, okay, if you want them to come into the office like once a month or something. But you can have a wider range for that. You can say, okay, once a month and we'll pay you travel. You can live an hour or even maybe 2 hours away because most of the time you're going to be working from home. Massively beneficial to employers as well as employees. So just the fact that you will be able to ask for a wider range of reasonable adjustments where you're still doing your work and where the employee will have to consider, it doesn't mean to say they have to grant it, they just have to consider it. If they've got a good reason for going, no, actually in this particular case it's not suitable, okay, fine, okay. But there we go. I would definitely have a look through this. It's just an incredibly useful way of just presenting what's coming. And it's a shame that Keir Starmer will sometimes put on this massive press conference to talk about, some immigration, aspect of immigration that is only just going to stoke up more people pissed off at boats, and yet doesn't think of doing one for something like this where people are going, oh yeah, I'd like that, that would benefit me. But anyway, there it is. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the subscribe button. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for behind the scenes access as well as access to streams. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.